Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro, where today we have a guest with us. Peter, welcome along.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. This is an interesting topic. This is a different one. We have definitely not gone here before on an Ideanthro episode. Today we are talking about gamification of water sensitive urban design, this sort of space. Peter, why don't you take a moment, introduce who you are and this project you've got going on, VR Water, what that is, and then we'll get into it. And I've got some questions that I'm curious to know about. So
Yeah, sure. So my name is Peter Bach. I'm from Monash University. I'm a research fellow there, and I recently secured a grant from the Australian government, the Australian Research Council, to undertake a project which, you want to call it the long title, it's called Virtual Reality for Planning of Green Urban Water Infrastructure, but I like to call it VR Water.
yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, it's a lot easier.
Yep.
Rolls off the tongue better.
Yeah.
So what it is really is, we have a whole generation of people who've grown up on computer games. Think SimCity, think Age of Empires, and they've, I guess, used these games not only as entertainment but to learn a few different things, like how our cities are composed of many different aspects, like transport, utilities, and they're now entering the industry. And we've been using books, we've been using videos in our industry for quite some time, and well, games have not really seen the light of day, so there's definitely an opportunity there.
Okay.
So what spurred me to look into this for WUSUD specifically is I've seen a lot of work coming out of the Netherlands where they've used gamifying, or
Yep.
serious gaming as what they call it over there, to engage practitioners in climate adaptation kind of scenarios where you're trying to plan out a floodplain management strategy and you bring practitioners on board. Really the main benefits, I guess, include learning new things about ways you can manage a floodplain, especially if you have uncertain challenges, being able to explore the possibilities in a risk-free environment, and then I guess as a group come together and find out a better way of collaborating. And that's really the focal point, the key winning aspect of this kind of research.
Okay.
How can we build better collaboration between stakeholders?
Okay. Cool. I like it. Now we've actually just had a really long chat off camera, because obviously as part of your project you're going around and talking to a whole bunch of different people and interviewing them to get perspectives on WUSUD and the like. One of the things that we, I suppose, touched on right at the end of that was how you potentially see this being used. And you said something along the lines of it could be really useful for giving people perspectives on the various other roles in WUSUD. So you might work in a local government and therefore you see WUSUD from this side, you see developers building assets and contributing them over, but you're not really sure what it's like to be on that side of the fence and so on. And you made a comment along the lines of this sort of thing might allow people to experience some of the other side of the fence. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, that's definitely a fair comment. I think one thing about games and the way they engage people is really the element of role playing, where you can put yourself in the role of, in the traditional sense, like a hero or a team that has an objective to fulfill. I think many teens will be able to understand that without the blink of an eye. But in the water sensitive space, you have similarly a lot of different roles that play a role in getting systems off the ground or getting new ideas into practice, and often part of the conflict comes from the fact that maybe people don't understand the complexities that each role brings with them. Not everyone is just focusing on water sensitive urban design. There's a lot of other responsibilities. Picture a water utility, for example, who might want to get on board in water recycling, but they have to maintain all the existing assets, making sure that their water supply system works, is foolproof, that their wastewater is disposed of adequately.
Yep.
A local government, if they're allocating budget for all their different assets, when we think of the word asset, you're not just thinking water sensitive urban design, you're thinking all the pits and pipes and drains, as well as the roads, park benches, even libraries.
Yep.
So I think often people tend to forget that with different roles comes a lot of different responsibilities, and sometimes it makes the decision making very complicated. And I think that, or at least I firmly believe that if you can at least illustrate that process and the complexity of that role to your players, if it's a local government in the role of a water utility, I think just that little bit of extra understanding will allow them to start changing their mindset and coming up with new ways of thinking of how you can, perhaps reach an amicable agreement or be efficient or try out something new.
It sounds like a really useful way to put yourself in someone else's shoes for a moment. I'm sure, I imagine it's not going to be a perfect representation of the real world, but I can certainly see the benefit of just also, and potentially being able to go back and do it regularly. So, okay, cool. I could play it once, or I could go spend one day hanging out with a developer or something. I could go meet with a developer for a few hours one night and ask them a whole bunch of stuff. I learned a whole bunch of stuff, but that's a one-off. I could see potential benefit here of being able to revisit this for 20 minutes once a month or whatever the time frame is, just to get that little dose of, oh yeah, that's right, that's the sort of thing that person's going through, or that person.
Yeah.
Because perspective, that almost, that empathy for another person's opinion or perspective on something, I think is really, really valuable. Because ultimately, if you're in local government and trying to write policy, having an understanding, having a perspective of what the developer who's complying with that is going to do and to think seems fairly important. And if you're the developer who's trying to comply with policy, and maybe it's a little awkward and making your life a little tougher than it otherwise would be, having some perspective on why the local government might have written it that way as opposed to another way. I could see all of those being really useful if for no other reason than just to be able to go, oh yeah, okay, maybe it's not 100% how I like the world to be, but I do get why they've done that.
Yeah.
So, okay, I can see the merits of that. How do you see this, what might this look like? I realise it's really early days and you're just doing the background research. What might this look like? Because when I first heard the title VR for water, I did imagine headsets and that level, but I'm now wondering if this is a little bit more like Age of Empires on the computer, or where do you reckon this might go?
So it's definitely early days, as you mentioned,
Yep.
and I think one of the things we're doing immediately, right out the bat, is try and experiment with different platforms.
Okay.
So there's a number of platforms out there. You have your VR headsets, which you can either power with a computer or your smartphones. You have your desktop computers, which we know very well. Then you have very large, technological installations where you can have group gaming sessions.
Just be everyone walks into a room and the whole room is the game, essentially. Is that
essentially,
sort of thing?
yeah.
Yep.
And so that could be either a combination of VR. So I know in Melbourne, for example, there is such an experience where they've rented out an entire warehouse for people to go in with headsets and computers strapped to their backs, and they can team up to fight zombies.
Yeah,
or
it's the zombies that are damaging our waterways right now, right?
Or at a more modest level, at Monash University, for example, we have a setup called the Cave. It's a room with something like 50 TV screens in a circle, and there's motion tracking and everything, so you can use it for visualization. Really something that's physically big. You've got smartphones as well, and you've got the more physical board games, which I think a lot of generations relate to as well. We're experimenting with a few of those at the moment. So for example, I've got some final year research students. They're looking at the potential of using headsets,
Okay.
and even using a 360 camera to capture some pictures of environments with water sensitive urban design in them. And we're going to try and first of all see what is the perception of people of these environments with the headset on, just looking at the pictures. But with today's technology, having those pictures is just the first step. Being able to then overlay information on top of those pictures, like for example, if you're trying to do an educational tour for people who are new to the field, you could overlay information that they can see when they look at a certain part of a system. That I think brings with it that power of engagement and immersion as well. We're looking at reviewing a lot of different existing games from the entertainment industry. So computer games like SimCity, Minecraft is another very popular one that's been mentioned, as well as smartphone games to see how they engage people, how they represent reality, or I guess what their representation of reality would be, and how suitable they are to, I guess, addressing certain applications for certain scenarios in the water-sensitive urban design sphere.
Okay.
So early days. Currently, I'm leaning towards the multiplayer, could be virtual reality headset, could be not, but kind of situation where you have your SimCity type environment, but people either perceive it differently, and you can do that through headsets, or you present that information in a very neat and very grand way to the people, and then give them a chance to make decisions one by one.
Yeah.
Sort of in a turn-based style.
Yeah, I like it. It reminds me a little, not that I'm suggesting this needs to go down these angles, but it's like a really simple, maybe an example of how a game can teach us principles about the real world. It's something that an experiment that I heard about just recently, where essentially a game was established, and this is trying to demonstrate why human societies evolved the ability to trade, but essentially established a game, multiple players go into it, and the aim would be to generate as much of a red token and a blue token as possible essentially by mining it. So you do an activity, and as a reward you get the red token and the blue token. And it's amazing how quickly in that particular scenario people realised that they could trade, because importantly, what no one in that instance was told about, but which was embedded into the game, was that some players mined the tokens at different rates, and how it didn't take very much playing at all before people worked out which ones they were better at, and then without any prompting, without being told that it was even possible to trade, worked out that they could switch tokens within it. And then people really quickly, there's like documented in the research, is a conversation between players in between rounds, because they had like 1 or 2 minute rounds or something, in between like the second or third round, where 2 of the players are like, "Oi, have you realised that we can exchange? And by the way, how quick are you at you just mined red and you just mined blue, we're just going to swap in the last 5 seconds."
Yeah.
And so it strikes me that I don't know exactly what a game like this might be able to teach people, but that little example strikes me as how something in this space something in virtual reality could teach us about perspectives on this world. So I like it.
I can definitely see parallels with that. A very common example I see prevalent in a lot of the interviews I've been doing is, how would a water utility and the local government share the costs in managing a water recycling system or an alternate water supply system that doubles as stormwater treatment? Along with that comes the economic question, the human resource question. How do you maintain the system over time, and how do you make sure that everyone is informed of the system's operation and how much water it's producing, and at the same time treating. I think people are still trying to work out efficient ways of going about it, often because once you bring in multiple stakeholders onto the scene, asset management becomes quite complex. I mean, we had a discussion about the challenges of asset management, especially in the water-sensitive sphere. Do you treat a rain garden as a single system on the asset register, or do you actually split it up into its civil, environmental, and parks components?
Yep.
So being able to experiment with different ideas of how you could, for example, achieve this dual management of a dual operation system that has both the water recycling and stormwater treatment benefits is just one such scenario that you could play out in the game environment.
I like it, and the game has the one key benefit in this space in that it has a reset button.
It does.
Because in the real world, there's sunk cost in these things. You can try it once, maybe try it twice, but after a while we're a little bit like, oh, come on, we can't just keep iterating and changing, can't keep restructuring or whatever. But I can see the merit of a game where you can play it, test it, reset, try again. It's a little bit like modelling, but maybe the lesson isn't about what's the best outcome, but more about what are the considerations for the best outcome. So
you raise an important point, which is that games are like models. Essentially, a lot of the games that we know out there, like SimCity or Civilization is another good example, they're built on pretty complex models. Like a lot of the early theories of urban modeling are what power a lot of SimCity games as well. Right. How land use changes, I mean, they're somewhat simplified in a way because you want the games to run in real time, they need to be fast,
Yep.
but they're still underpinned by a certain amount of science, because how do you evoke that realism in the player? Often if you have the science to back you up, that, you know, achieves pretty much that aim.
Yep.
The single biggest difference between modeling and gaming, or models and games for that matter, is that games often have a predefined objective, a predefined endpoint. Models can span, you know, you can use models to explore quite a lot of different angles and areas. Often when you approach the game, even if it's a simulation game, there's often a very clearly defined, you know, end game. In SimCity, it would be making sure your city is sustainable as you progress through time, and the longer you progress, you know, and as long as you can progress through time and you maintain your budget and you're in the positive, you know, you're pretty much doing well. In games like Age of Empires, really the objective is grow your empire fast enough so that you can beat your opponent.
Yep.
Same with Civilization. In Civilization, often you have many different ways to win, or so many paths to victory. Choose your best strategy and stick with it.
Interesting.
Or, you know, if you feel adventurous, change your strategy halfway and see how that affects your success. And that's a very important distinction I think we have to make, because games are not supposed to be seen as tools that will, you know, replace models or sit alongside models as solving all the problems you have. And, you know, I'm wary of that as I go into this, I guess, very ambitious and interesting project. The key is to design a game that will, I guess, bring an effective outcome. To me, that effective outcome is allowing stakeholders to better understand the complex dynamics. They're not going to understand everything, but hopefully they'll see a significant amount of the challenges that other types of stakeholders face, the other types of roles face, and what perhaps maybe some collaborative strategies might bring them in the future. And that would get them excited and hopefully exploring new ideas as we go into the future.
I like it. And part of the reason that I like that is because when you first mentioned this, okay, let's make a game about water-sensitive urban design, one of the concerns that I had was, oh, is this going to turn out like some of the other models? This isn't meant to be a criticism of music or any other model. But where some of this has been taken at the moment is that because a model is just our best representation of the world that we can come up with, if we start to use it as a tool to then optimize to the absolute nth degree, then we end up optimizing way beyond the realm of how accurate that model was. So part of me was sitting here going, oh, if we're about to make a game about this, is the intent that people are going to play the game and it's going to tell us the best spot to put all the bar attention systems? And I was like, that seems really troublesome, in the same way a model is. But it's not troublesome if the goal is to teach us about perspectives on the way things play out. So, yeah.
That's I think I can understand your concern there. Coming from the modeling sphere myself, I am the developer of Urban Beats, which is...
yep. I haven't had a chance to play deeply, although there's a workshop on Wednesday, right? So
no, that's for a different model. That's the Water Sensitive Cities Toolkit.
Ah, yeah, okay, right. Anyway, there's still a workshop about a model. So.
Yep, definitely a workshop about a model.
Yep.
So, you know, I've been through the modeling sphere for quite a few years of pretty much most of my research career, and I've been delving into this question of optimization, and I think, you know, I've pretty much decided as my ethos that we're not trying to predict the future, we're not trying to optimize. Models should be support tools for stakeholders and trying to deliver better outcomes.
Yep.
Now, you know, one of the ways of going about that is the approach of exploratory modeling, which is quite prevalent in the policy science. So when I built Urban Beats as a model, or I call it a planning support tool,
Yep.
you know, the idea was to allow stakeholders to explore different options of how you can place water-sensitive urban design in the urban environment. It was by no means an optimization tool, because ultimately, you know, you can find all the best spots to place a bioretention system, but there's always going to be something else in a particular context that's going to stop you from it.
Yeah.
And it may not be, you know, it may not be an institutional aspect. It could be a physical thing, but you know, nothing is set in stone. But if you can use the model to better understand what your most opportune locations is, it essentially automates a process that would otherwise take hours and days to do.
Yeah, and I think this is the key distinction here, which is I don't think it's a problem with like models inherently that they go like get optimized to the nth degree. It's just occasionally the policy settings and policy context within which we put them. There's no problem with music and what it does, but perhaps the policy that we've built around it and the stormwater objectives and the fact that it is set up as the tool through which to demonstrate your performance and the way that then causes us to optimize to the nth degree, it's actually the problem with the policy, not the model itself. In the same way that, so conceivably, a game like this, potential lots of benefits if used appropriately, but conceivably if someone set an inappropriate policy setting around it at some point as well, then maybe it could be accidentally used the wrong way. But it's not the game, or it's not the model. So.
Yeah. And building on your point, really, where games come in on this is there's an expectation with models that you're trying to at least have a partial representation of reality, that people looking at it will be familiar with a particular precinct that you're simulating.
Yep.
Games don't have that restriction.
Oh, because it's not... Yeah.
In that visual, in that content sense, you do not necessarily have to make sure you get your streetscape.
Because you're not projecting the real world.
Exactly.
You're creating a world that... okay. Yep.
You can just as well use a fictitious environment that resembles, Brisbane, for example, the inner Brisbane area, or somewhere along the coast, and give that to people, and they can then... It allows them to more freely think of different solutions that would suit that context, and they can start beginning to see how that applies to their own area.
That's potentially a lot more transferable as well, because you conceivably don't have to rebuild it for different locations in the way you would build a flood model for Brisbane.
Yeah.
You potentially, maybe you need a few particular typologies of, you need the coastal one, you need the inner city one, but you don't need the Melbourne inner city one or the Brisbane inner city one. Okay.
It's breaking down a problem into elements that are quite crucial and maybe looking at them one by one. If, for example, you're trying to manage along the Brisbane River, build a city that runs with a river running through it and manage that first, and then you can go to the next problem. But sometimes people don't see obvious solutions in a particular environment because they're so embedded in it. But once you take them out and you show them something that's similar but that they're not familiar with, I think it opens up their mind, and they can start seeing how that, how new ideas can come to fruition as a result.
I like it.
Put them back in their environment, and hopefully that realization will occur.
Yeah, you want to take some of that back out.
The epiphany moment.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. Are there any other angles, any other interesting thoughts that we should explore here before we go?
I think it's the challenge of trying to create a game that's nationally applicable. I think that's going to be an interesting journey that I'm embarking on. So as of today, I've completed 60 interviews with practitioners across the country.
That's quite a lot of time invested. I know you did just say that at like 2 hours and something, mine was the second longest interview yet, but that's still a lot of time invested.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The average length has been about 75 minutes, which is no small amount of time.
Yep.
And there's a lot of rich data coming out of that. I think, distilling that at a national level, with that, with the subtleties across every single major city, and linking that together with, the visual arts from the gaming industry, the IT aspects, the engineering, making sure you still get the water sensitive urban design stuff right, the economics of it all, it is going to be a very strong interdisciplinary challenge. So, it's, and I guess that's, it's part of, it's part of why we do this research, trying to solve those challenges. So even, it's a journey I'm beginning on. So hopefully the outcome will be good.
Well, but like anything in life, though, even if it isn't everything that you hope it to be, it's one of these things. Document the process and the learnings, and then someone iterates on it at some point. Yeah. So long as there's lessons to be learned from everything. But fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And I've got an excellent team of collaborators as well.
Yeah.
So we've got Megan Farrelly from the social science team. We have Tom Morgan, who's an architect.
Okay.
We've got Riyad Saberi from Monash Transport.
Okay.
He's actually an expert in a lot of the engagement side as well as the network analysis.
Yep.
And Anna Delitic, who we know is a very strong figure in water sensitive urban design. So, and I think as time passes, I will be able to find more people I think who will be coming on board as well. So there is definitely interest in this field. So
I've got to now, as we've talked, particularly over the last half hour or so, I'm more interested now. That at the beginning I was like, I want to have this chat because I'm curious about what this might be. Now I'm like, oh wait, I actually see potential, and I'm interested in it in its own. I'm not just interested because I'm curious now. I'm interested because I'm like, there is potential here. So I like it.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward. I guess building it is the one challenge, and then the second challenge is getting people to playing the actual game.
Yep.
So far, I've been receiving hopeful responses. A lot of people are wanting to try it at least.
Yeah, I don't think you'll have dramas getting people to try it. Long-term playing? Yeah, but...
Long term, I guess, is always a challenge, and that's, I think, general for any model, any kind of software you build. Trying to get it to be updated, maintained, always debugged if there's errors, and trying to keep the interest going.
Yep.
But I'm hoping that with the new generation going into the industry, that they can essentially champion, or at least lead the way. We had a nice discussion about the role of champions earlier, so
yep.
I think you'll definitely need one or two champions in each organization to sort of awaken the interest, and hopefully people take it on board with time. Technology is becoming more intuitive, and a lot of available tools to make games like these, that basically compare very well to the professional game industry, they're becoming more widely available and easier to use. So I think it's only a matter of time with the technology industry that many people will start adopting this kind of approach to stakeholder engagement, communication, even modeling and design for that matter.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay. Let's wrap it up there.
Yeah.
Before we go, so you're up in Brisbane, so we're filming this on... Today is the 3rd of July. I'm going to release this tomorrow being the 4th of July. You're up in Brisbane for what? How many more days?
I'm here to the 7th.
Okay. Yeah. So is this an opportunity? If someone's watched this straight away and is like, I'm really interested, are you happy for people to contact you? Or just definitely. In general, if people watch this and want to know more, how do people find you?
So you can find me on my website, peterambach.com. I'm also on Twitter.
Okay.
If you're interested in participating, send me an email at peter.bach@monash.edu.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how to do phone interviews. Sort of working out the technology. This project has definitely taught me a lot about audio recording tech. So
yep.
Getting my head around it. But yeah, phone interviews are an option. If people just want to follow me and know more, there's the websites. I'll be making a website for VR Water, I think in the near future. So yeah, that will be the main platform.
Okay, wicked, cool. Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you for wanting to interview me for this project and having a chat, and thank you for having a chat on camera. It's cool.
No, thanks
I appreciate it.
Really enjoyed it.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Cheers.
Cheers.